have an original. Yeah. Here we get started. Good evening, everybody. I'm calling the meeting to order. And a quick roll call as we have a quorum tonight with Mrs. Wheeler and Mrs. Cashin. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We start off our meetings with our mission statement, so I'm going to run through that for you. Our mission statement is the Carmel Clay Schools will provide opportunities for all students to realize their potential in an ever-changing world. Tonight we start off with some presentations. The Carmel High School Symphony Orchestra State Champions. Tonight we'll recognize them for and the Carmel High School Wind Symphony, the #1 state champs, and the Carmel High School Ambassador State champs. So Mr. Creek, if you could lead us in that, please. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you to the board members, Dr. Osterreich, Mr. McMichael, Dr. Dudley, Dr. Herrera, for your time this evening to recognize state championships by 3 of our CHS Performing Arts groups. This is the first time that we have won 3 concert state championships in a single year, and as we all know, doing something for the first time at Carmel High School is a pretty unique thing at this point in time. So proud of these kids and their directors' efforts. The ISMA State Championships for Concert Band, Symphony Orchestra, and Mixed Choir were held on Saturday, May 9th, and all 3 were won by concert ensembles at CHS, Wind Symphony 1, the Symphony Orchestra, and the Ambassadors. We've got students and directors representing all 3 groups with us here tonight. The Symphony Orchestra was awarded the Concert Orchestra State Championship for the 2nd time in the last 3 years, an amazing 20th time overall. That's half of the state championships in orchestra that have been held. Under the direction of Tom Chin, with assistance from Nicole DeGuire and Maggie Height, the Symphony Orchestra gave an absolutely stunning performances of some wildly difficult music. The Symphony Orchestra is being represented this evening. If I could have these students and directors come forward here to receive some certificates from Dr. Osterreich. They're being represented here this evening by students Elijah Kim, Taylor Zhuang, and directors Nicole DeGuire and Maggie Height. Oh, I can just talk. I'm good. Wind Symphony 1 was awarded the Concert Band State Championship for the 8th consecutive year and the 11th time overall. Under the direction of Kyle Young and Ethan Wilkinson, Wind Symphony 1 also gave an incredible performance at Lawrence Central High School and were unanimously awarded first place by all 3 judges. Wind Symphony 1 is being represented here this evening by students Emma Choi, Jasmine Choi, Nina Godbowl, and director Ethan Wilkinson. Mr. Young was unable to be with us tonight. He's down visiting Mickey Mouse in Florida with his kids and wife and couldn't make it back for this one. Our third group for the evening that we're going to recognize are the ambassadors, who were awarded the Concert Mixed Choir State Championship for the second time in the program's history. Under the direction of Kyle Barker, the ambassadors also gave an amazing performance of some really incredibly varied literature. The ambassadors are being represented here this evening by students Grady Griffin, Annabelle Kim, Emma Miller, and Maki Mora, and director Kyle Barker. We'll be sure to share video of all three performances with all of you. They were truly tremendously musical performances of some very, very difficult literature, and the kids and directors all did just absolutely incredible jobs. Thank you all so much for your continued support of the arts at Carmel High School and Carmel Clay Schools. We were also named one of the NAM, National Association of Music Merchants, Best Communities for Music Education this year for the, I think, 13th or 14th time. And it's certainly a testament to what Carmel Clay Schools does in support of the arts. So thank you all very much. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. The next recognition is the Carmel Clay Schools Support Staff Member of the Year. Ms. Zinkeep, please.
Good evening, Secretary Brown, Dr. Ostrike, and members of the board, as well as our families and students. I'm honored to announce Mr. David Sunshine as our 2025-2026 Support Staff Member of the Year. Mr. Sunshine has worked for Carmel Clay Schools since 2014, and he is a bus driver in our transportation department. He had many nominations for this honor, and the recommendations all shared a common theme. One nominator said it perfectly. Mr. Sunshine creates a positive experience for students every day. He is attentive, patient, and dependable, and families can trust that their children are in good hands on his bus. He goes beyond transporting the students to and from school. He makes them feel welcome and cared for. His friendly attitude, kind greetings, and consistent professionalism help set a positive tone for the school day and make a real difference for our students and our families. Congratulations again.
All right, good evening, Secretary Brown, Dr. Ostrike, and members of the board. It is my pleasure this evening to announce the recipient of the 2026 Teacher of the Year Award for Carmel Clay Schools. This outstanding educator exemplifies excellence in teaching, dedication to students, and a commitment to making a difference every day. Please join me in congratulating our 2026 Teacher of the Year, first grade teacher, Megan Cronkite from West Clay Elementary School. Through her dedication, compassion, and commitment to student success, she has inspired countless young learners and families throughout her career. She fosters kindness, problem solving, confidence, and a lifelong love of learning, making a lasting impact on her students' lives. Her passion, commitment, and unwavering support make her truly deserving of this honor. So give me one more round of applause for Megan Cronkite.
I just wanted to take one last moment to congratulate all of our students, our staff members, and most importantly, our families and parents and community members for being here tonight, recognizing the outstanding achievements of our students, our staff members, our Teacher of the Year, our Support Staff Person of the Year. I also want a special thank you to Mayor Finkum. She is here with us today, and she is a great supporter of Carmel Clay Schools, but love having her in person tonight, seeing the wonderful accomplishments of our teachers, students, and our staff. So once again, congratulations. We appreciate you.
Normally at this point, after presentations and awards, we excuse those that don't want to stay on and hear about policy and budget. And also the kids, so they go home and study and get homework done and all that. But maybe not tonight, but you can go home and have some ice cream, or you can stay and listen about budget and policy. Your choice. Run, yeah, run away. Thank you all for coming. At this point in our meeting, we have it open for public comment, but we do not have anyone that's signed up tonight to make comments, so we'll proceed. Next on our agenda are consent items. And tonight, the consent items include the personnel report, claims, payroll, the minutes from the April 29th, 2026 workshop session. They're having fun. The minutes from the May 13th, 2026 executive session, and the minutes from the May 13th, 2026 regular session meetings. As a reminder, consent items in the meeting refer to a designated section where routine items are grouped together for efficient consideration and approval in a single motion as opposed to individual motions for each item. Consent items typically include items the board must legally address, but which should not take up considerable time, including payroll, accounts payable, personnel reports, minutes from previous meetings, and other administrative matters that do not require extensive discussion. By incorporating them all in a consent agenda, the meeting can be streamlined through the approval process and allowing more time dedicated for critical topics and meaningful deliberation. Do I have a motion to approve all items in the consent item?
Mr. President, I move that we approve items 4.2 through 4.7 as a group.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I second.
Okay, are there any questions or explanations, any discussion on any of the consent items? Okay. We will now vote. So all those in favor of approving all the items in the consent agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. That's everybody. So no opposed. Thank you. Dr. Herrera has an announcement related to the personnel report. Dr. Herrera?
Yes, thank you. So good evening again, Secretary Brown, Dr. Ostrike, and members of the board. This evening, I am pleased to announce the appointment of Brian Bierman as the principal of Woodbrook Elementary School. Brian has served as principal for the past 6 years at Feschers Elementary School. Throughout his career, he has demonstrated a strong commitment to student achievement, educational excellence, and cultivating a positive school culture. He is known for building strong relationships with students, staff, and families while fostering a supportive learning environment. We are excited to welcome him as our new principal of Woodbrook Elementary School and look forward to the positive impact he will have on our school community.
Thank you. I also would like to add, Mr. Bierman, welcome to Carmel. We're very excited to have you as part of the Woodbrook community. Board members, I will tell you, this was a very competitive interview process. We had sitting principals all over the state of Indiana that wanted to come to Carmel Clay Schools, and Brian stood out for his ability to collaborate on the high level and his knowledge of instructional practices and how researched he is, and he is a lifelong learner. We are very pleased to have Mr. Bierman as part of our team here in Carmel. So congratulations again.
Thank you. Okay, the next section of our meeting is on some action items. And our next one is, the first one is the adoption of a resolution in support of military families. Mr. Woodward, please.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. I would like to discuss Purple Star designation, which is offered by the Indiana Department of Education. The Indiana Purple Star designation honors schools that has displayed a significant commitment to service members, veterans, and students and families of those military members. And we are a Purple Star designated school. The Purple Star designation is valid for a 3-year time period, and we received our Purple Star designation in the fall of 2023. So our time to renew is now. As part of the Purple Star designation process, I want to make the school board aware that we would need a resolution supporting military families. In addition to the resolution, our renewal process includes a designated point of contact at each school who will act as the point person for military families and their students. A dedicated web page that the schools have that provides recognition and resources for service members and their families. A public military display that recognizes service members, veterans, and their students and families. And each of our schools has these. And finally, military service members and their immediate family members who meet the minimum qualifications for job openings within the school corporation will be guaranteed a job interview at Carmel Clay Schools. So with this information, I ask the board to pass a resolution in support of military families, which would allow us again to seek Purple Star designation.
Great, thank you. May I have a motion to adopt the resolution in support of military families?
I move to adopt the resolution in support of military families.
Thank you. May I have a second?
I second.
We will now take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
As a majority, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Woodward. Our next action item is the authority to hire certified and non-certified staff and accept resignations from June 10th, 2026 through August 26, 2026. Dr. Ostreich?
Thank you again, Secretary Brown and members of the board. We request that the board give myself, Dr. Tom Ostreich, and also Dr. Holly Herrera, our Assistant Superintendent of Staff and Student Services, the authority to hire both certified and non-certified staff and accept resignations from today, June 10th, 2026, through August 26th of 2026. The purpose of this request is to accelerate the hiring process over the summer. Personnel hired or resigning during this time will immediately be reported to the board and will appear on the personnel report at the next board meeting. This is an annual request that we bring to the board so that we can be efficient in our hiring practices, and it also allows other districts to quickly post the positions where the staff member has resigned. Oftentimes during the year, for example, if we hire a principal, which we did today, they don't resign until they're board approved. With this resolution, we will certainly go through all of the required background checks and legal pieces before we make that offer as we do in HR, but this gives us the authority to move efficiently throughout the summer as we approach the school year. So it is recommended that the board give authority to myself and Dr. Herrera to hire both certified and non-certified staff and accept resignations from today, June 10th, through August 26th, 2026. Thank you.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve giving authority to hire certified and non-certified staff and accept resignations from June 10th, 2026 through August 26th, 2026 to Dr. Ostrike and Dr. Herrera?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move to give Dr. Ostrike and Dr. Herrera authority to hire certified and non-certified staff and accept resignations from June 10th, today, through August 26th, 2026.
Great. Thank you. Any discussion?
I
Do I have a
second.
second? I already had you filled in for some reason. Yeah, is there,
Process
thank you for that.
elimination.
Any discussion? Okay. We will now take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nope. Thank you. Our next agenda item is on actions is for the transfer of cash reserves. Mr. McMichael, could you fill us in on that?
Yes, this transfer will rebalance cash reserves between funds, so has no impact on the cash. It's a matter of balancing the funds. And so the benefit of that is we will, it will improve our balance in our education operating referendum and rainy day funds. As you know, those funds are particularly considered with Standard & Poor's as we consider bond issues and so forth. And then with regard to the, it'll also minimize the need for temporary interfund loans to the self-insurance fund. Because that fund in particular, we're paying claims really every week. And so that sometimes the balance gets low enough that we, as part of the routine, we do an interfund loan. That's not a huge deal, but this simply would minimize the need to do that, and so that's the basis for the recommendation.
Okay. May I have a motion to approve the transfer of cash reserves?
I motion to approve the transfer of cash reserves.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, we will now, is there any discussion? Anything further? Okay, and just a quick comment. My understanding on the operations transfer to the self-insurance is that we need to get that back up to our normal level, but it's had some impact from some little more unusual claims. But this just gets us back to our target.
It certainly, yes. I don't know if it totally restores it, but this past year, as you know, we did use some cash balance, had really a slight deficit comparatively speaking, and so yes, this will improve that goal. We wanted 12%, and we really were right at 12%, and then it dropped a bit below that. So this would address that.
Okay, thank you. We will now take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. We're entering our discussion item at this point, the Carmel Clay Parks Department, regarding Veterans Park in the Greenway in the Carmel Clay Schools. We have Odin Woods and Mr. Klitzing to discuss for us.
And as they are getting set up, I just want to say a thank you for being here tonight. We appreciate the city being here. We look forward to tonight's presentation. And as they will explain, it does involve some of Carmel Clay School's land that they will highlight this evening. But we're very excited about tonight's presentation. So we'll turn it over.
Secretary Brown, Dr. Osterreich, members of the board, thank you for this opportunity to share with you our plans for Veterans Park and Veterans Greenway. As Dr. Osterreich explained, our vision is not possible without a collaboration with Carmel Clay Schools. So we wanted to share our plans, give you an opportunity to think about it, ask any questions, and then our goal is to come back with a proposed agreement to allow this to happen. So to give a little bit of background, and I want to thank Mayor Finkham, this is a project that would not be possible without the support of the City of Carmel. The City of Carmel has provided $15 million to be able to construct this new park, a new greenway that is envisioned to go from basically parallel to Old Meridian Street, kind of, from Main Street to a little bit south of Grand Boulevard, and also a new autumn greenway that will go east-west from Old Meridian Street to effectively the Monon Greenway. And our goal is to effectively create a interconnected pathway off-street greenway experience to unite our two commercial districts and urban cores with Old Meridian and the Meridian corridors. So we're very excited about that project. And then another component of it, in addition to Veterans Greenway, is this new park, which is a partnership with the Carmel Redevelopment Commission, as well as with the developer of a new multifamily project, which made acquisition of this 1.6-acre park to honor and celebrate our veterans and military families possible. So to give a little bit of overview, well, first of all, the timing is perfect with your recent resolution earlier tonight to be a Purple Star designation or continue to pursue that. This certainly aligns perfectly with that. And I also want to make one note. In your board packet, there was a misspelling, totally my fault, that had Dr. Oldham as O-D-E-N. And my board historian with Carmel Clay Park Board, Jim Garrettson, kindly indicated that the spelling was incorrect. So, of course, I did my due diligence afterwards. And even though Google Maps shows it as O-D-E-N, it is truly O-D-O-M. So my teachers would be proud of me fessing up for a mistake. So the first component of it is Veterans Greenway. And we're developing this greenway in a couple phases. The first phase is the area that most directly impacts Carmel Clay Schools. And as I indicated, this first phase will start right at Grand Boulevard, go north, basically on the east side of the former Collegewood Elementary School site, certainly part of the Carmel Middle School campus, through Oldham Woods, go onto our new park property, continue north through private easements, and then have to, in a very small sliver, come back onto school property before connecting to the Icon on Main development and a portion of the trail that they're developing on our behalf. The easement request that we have for the schools basically is for the trail through Oldham Woods, as well as that little corner in the northeast corner of the Carmel Middle School property. Zooming in a little bit closer, here you can see Oldham Woods. We would also request a temporary easement for basically the lay down of our construction equipment while the project is being completed, and that, of course, will be cleaned up and restored as soon as the work is completed. The other portion, zooming in a little bit, is literally just a small corner where we have to zag a little bit to connect to the property to the north. Moving on to Veterans Park, this is a new 1.6-acre park that will be immediately west of Carmel Middle School and the track that you have there. And here you can kind of see the alignment of it as well as representation of where the greenway interacts with it. Zooming in a little bit closer, this is the schematic design plans that the Park Board approved last night for the phased development of this park and this sort of big picture vision that we have for it. A big component of this is we assembled a steering committee comprised of various veterans and family members that gave our design team, Ratio Architects, a lot of feedback as far as what they'd like to see this park be and not be. And one of the big missions that we were given was to make it, instead of making a park about veterans, meaning they didn't want it to be like a single focus. You come to see like a a statue or one element that celebrates veterans, but it to be a place that is for veterans and their families, as well as the community at large. And that's what kind of drove the design for it. It's a little bit more active than you see some traditional veterans parks. And active is a really loose term. It's not like it's going to have sports fields or those type of things, but it's going to allow a little bit more interaction. It provides opportunities for people to gather and play and really enjoy themselves, as well as tell the stories of our military, those that have contributed to it currently as well as in the past, those who have sacrificed their lives, as well as their families that certainly have supported and been impacted by their service. With this, sorry, went too far. Some illustrations of what it's going to look like. On the left is effectively the Greenway Trail. And when we talk about a Greenway Trail, obviously the Monon is our most famous one. Hagen-Burke Trail is also a good representation. The Greyhound Trail, which ultimately connects to the football stadium. Those are all representative of it. And the idea is that you have a 10 to 12 foot paved trail, multi-use for pedestrians, bicyclists, runners, what have you. But it's an off-street experience. It gives a completely different type of experience than a perimeter path that follows a road. It makes it more inviting. It makes it feel safer. It makes it much more enjoyable. It allows you to embrace nature a little bit more, as well as in appropriate places, have a little sense of urban life too. So this is if you're going south, just coming off of the Carmel Middle School property, going through the park. The park itself is going to have several different components. On the north side, several shelters that allow people to gather. It has a fireplace in it. Our veterans said that they wanted to have both water elements and fire elements in it, so this is how we embrace the fire components of it, but a place where people can gather. We're calling this kind of the living room because it's a place where we can have cornhole boards and other types of activities. We could potentially have some spray features in there, 6 of them to honor the 6 different branches of the military. Swings that overlook the lower grass area that can accommodate up to 100 people in an event, as well as another green area. Off to the right, the building in the background is the multi-family development. That developer is actually developing the public restrooms and in perpetuity will be responsible for maintaining it. So a way that we're partnering in a way in such to minimize the ongoing operation expense for the taxpayers. Sort of flipping to a north-looking view, here you can see a pond with a boardwalk that goes over it, connecting the greenway ultimately to a trail that goes off to Old Meridian Street, which is the access point to our west from a pedestrian standpoint. That building also includes underground parking, and that will be the parking for this new park. But here, the water serves for stormwater purposes, both for the multifamily development as well as for the park. Again, it also provides a little bit of relaxing elements. It does the check mark for the water. We have a waterfall element. Again, 6 different waterfalls representing the 6 different branches. Some of our representation is a little bit more subtle, like 6 things, but some of them will also have interpretive signage in different places that we're still working with the steering committee as to exactly what we're going to interpret, whether it's specific individuals, the 6 branches, combination thereof, but there will be both sort of very obvious elements and a little bit subtle elements. What's nice about this park, as well as the greenways, it also effectively connects the VFW post, which is immediately to the south, to the American Legion post, which is just past it on Main Street. And we envision working with our veterans communities there to have different programming. Certainly would invite students to come and have those programs. We envision bringing our summer camps there as well. So we can have veterans tell their stories, and we think that could be incredibly powerful, whether it's to students or just members of the community. Zooming in on Odom Woods, this is immediately south of the park. The Odom Woods is kind of an L-shaped and consists of 2 different partials. This is the northern partial. And what we envision here with the school board's consent is that we would ultimately, this is probably a subsequent phase, but we would ultimately create a trail network within the woods, likely soft surface or aggregate trails, that would also include some type of artwork. The illustrations on the right are conceptual. That's not specific. We would hone in on it. But one of the ideas from our steering committee is basically, you know, a brigade, a unit that is in the midst of combat, so we can tell the stories. And the fact that, you know, involvement in the military has sometimes very severe consequences, and we don't want to hide away from that, but we also want to do it in a way that is educational, respectful, commemorative. So that's one of the things that we're thinking about and would request your consideration for. Jumping to Odom Woods as a whole, the box on the left is effectively about 10 acres. It already has an existing trail network that is illustrated in this graphic. There actually is a little lake that takes it out to Grand Boulevard. What we are proposing is that the school board effectively give us a management agreement for the property. The schools would retain ownership. It would have provisions that allow you to also use the property in different ways in the future if circumstances dictate, with appropriate terms related to it. What it would also do is basically, while it's under Carmel Clay Parks and Recreation stewardship, we would be responsible for all the operating expenses for it. So, you know, at-risk tree mitigation, maintenance of the existing trail, as well as any new trails that we put in. The agreement would also basically say that we'd have to do things consistent with the schematic plan that was approved by the park board, as well as before we do any improvements, we would bring it back to the school board to ensure that we continue to have your consent to move forward. We would agree to put a signage along Grand Boulevard that recognizes it as Odom Woods, so it's, you know, a little bit more prominent. Maybe Google will get it corrected so that it's named properly for those that are searching for it. As well as we would work with Carmel Clay Schools to have a commemorative educational signage within the trail network to say why is it named after Dr. Odom, and what did he do? He was the first curriculum director for Carmel Clay Schools. So we can work together to share that story. And that's something that Carmel Clay Parks is trying to do for all of our parks and facilities that are named after someone. You know, let the public know who they did, why they were important to our community, and have helped make us who we are. With that, that's the overview. That's the ask. I'd be happy to entertain any questions that the school board has.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Klitzing. Do we have any questions or comments from the board? Jennifer?
I will say your department never ceases to amaze me, to be quite honest. I think you guys just do a phenomenal job taking into consideration the community that's really being honored through the work that you do or is going to be utilizing the parks that you guys create. And I've watched the conversations that you've had and how you've shared that with the community as to this work that you're looking to doing here. And I'm really proud of Carmel continually for how much we talk with the community about their interests. And I love that this park is becoming, instead of an observation, it's an immersion, really. And, you know, you don't just go see a statue and then 3 minutes later you're like, oh, let's go to lunch. It's really involving yourself in it and making it part of your life. And I also appreciate that I bike to it from my house. But one question I do have just regarding the artwork installation, knowing that you are saying that any improvements would come before the board, I honor the military aspects of it and the brigade. I will say having statues with guns essentially very close to a school is a little concerning for me. So I would want us to very much collaborate on that execution.
We thought that might be the case, and the architects had a little bit more literal. I personally think that it needs to be a little bit more conceptual. Maybe it's shapes as opposed to literal statues of a brigade going or a unit going through. So, but yes, that's something we're happy to work with, and I think that's a conversation that we would certainly welcome and embrace with Carmel Clay Schools, as well as the community at large.
Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. I echo the comments that Mrs. Cashin made, and also, and I know they were just conceptual. It did very much remind me of the Korean War Memorial in Washington, D.C. Some of those photos may have been from that. And I think, you know, if you're able to capture the feeling that that memorial brings to mind, I think you will have done well, whether it's literal or conceptual, but that, it is a very real um, thing for those in our military and their families. And you, for example, see sculptures of soldiers that look a little shell-shocked, that are looking behind them to see if there's anyone, coming on their six. And, if we could do anything close to that kind of honorary memorial, I think that it would be a remarkable thing for our community. So I appreciate that. This may be a question for Dr. O, but is there a sense of when the management agreement might come before us, or is that kind of a to-do item for the future?
We started working on that, and so potentially it could be the next board meeting.
Thank you.
I
We
just have
certainly-
one comment. I've recently was in the Post at the VFW, and they've got these same renderings on some pretty big boards, and there's a lot of excitement there. And it's kind of sad in a way, their location. They're tucked off the street. You don't even know they're there. But there's some very dedicated, proud people that have put their lives at risk in that post, and similarly with American Legion. And I think it's really it's a wonderful thing to be able to bring that honor to particularly Carmel people that have served for us in that way. And I hear what you're saying with the what we would like to see with the statues and rendering, but it's going to probably be a pretty fine line to draw. Things. There's a reality here with wars and the things people have to do. So I'll be interested to see how you guys can figure that out. I'm sure there'll be a solution there somewhere.
Absolutely. I will be honest, I suspect that this will be a second or third phase of the project, so that's not going to be the first thing
Yeah.
that we develop. You're going to see the elements that are to the north, the pond, all the trails, the living room space. That's what the dollars will get us first. The elements within the woods would come probably second.
Great. One more comment?
Yeah, just want to say thank you very much. I often share with members of the community that when the city and the schools work together, we can't lose. And this is a prime example of that here today. I appreciate your work. I appreciate Mayor Finkum and Mr. Klitzing, your collaboration together as we initially met on this, and I'm excited. I also envision our students, especially at Carmel Middle School, having the opportunity to utilize this on a nice summer day. If the English teacher can take his or her class over to Veterans Park and be able to teach a lesson or read a book or really immerse themselves into this wonderful park. And so I just want to say thank you very much. We appreciate the city and really looking forward to finalizing that agreement, bringing that back to the board for approval, and then seeing what our future holds. And so thank you for all this work. We appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Dr. Osterreich, and we certainly are very appreciative of the longstanding collaboration that Carmel Clay Parks and Recreation, the city of Carmel, has with Carmel Clay Schools. Like you said, together, there's so much that we do for the community to make it the #1 place to live in the United States. So, and we certainly appreciate our partnership with the Extended School Enrichment Program, the ability to use your facilities during the summer to help facilitate summer camps for our community's kids. So again, thank you very much, and we very much value that relationship.
Great. Thank you very much for your presentation, Mr. Klitzing. Okay, next on the agenda, in the discussion item, we have the first reading of policy 4210 on wireless electronic devices. Dr. Herrera?
Yes, thank you. Let me get set up just in a moment. I want to be able to project the policy that we're going to talk about. Okay, Secretary Brown, Dr. Ostrike, and members of the board. Tonight, I am presenting Policy 4210 in response to SCA 78, commonly referred to as bell-to-bell no-cell law. The proposed policy prohibits students from using personal wireless communication devices during the school day and requires that such devices be powered off, stored away, and inaccessible to students throughout the instructional day. This draft policy was developed collaboratively with the Director of Student Services, the Director of Technology, Director of Special Education, our building principals, and input provided by our policy liaisons. The policy was also reviewed by legal counsel to ensure compliance. In conjunction with this work, we reviewed Policy 7540, Responsible Use of Technology and Internet, and determined that no revisions to that policy were necessary at this time. So I am bringing Policy 4210 before the board this evening for its first reading. Are there any questions you may have at this time?
We have one.
Not really a question, just an appreciation to Mrs. Cashin, Dr. Herrera, and Mr. Woodward and the whole team, Dr. Dudley, that worked on the policy. I know sometimes we read these aloud. Dr. O, is that something that you would like us to do?
Completely up to you. People certainly can access this online, but if you'd like to read through it or give a synopsis of what it
Yeah.
is, that might be good. Maybe a summary.
I'll just hit the highlights. How's that? Okay. Because I feel like when I read them aloud and it drones on and wah, 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 wah. Peanuts. So on this, again, this bell-to-bell no-cell policy was developed as a result of a new bill that becomes effective July 1 in Indiana. Some of the differences between how we operate now and how we must operate under this new law is that it includes not just cell phones, but all wireless devices that have internet connectivity, which includes Apple Watches and smart glasses and any kind of what we would call a smart device, including laptop computers, digital cameras, gaming devices, anything that is connected to a cell phone, a cell tower, or the internet. And while students will be allowed to use it on the bus and before and after school, students will no longer be able to use their wireless devices during lunch periods or during recess. Again, that is specified in the new law. That is not our district's personal policy. And also wanted to highlight that we talked today and are excited and appreciative that the administration is working towards how we roll that out so that we'll have plenty of communications to families about this new policy. And if you don't like it, contact your friendly local legislator. Mrs. Cashin, anything else?
I just want to emphasize that inaccessibility is essentially what the law comes down to. As Ms. Wheeler mentioned, it no longer being available during passing periods or lunch, but what that really means is that it should be stowed away inaccessible from the moment school starts to the moment it ends, not carrying it around in your hand hoping to get a text message from somebody. It is supposed to be away. So again, reiterating what Ms. Wheeler said, I really appreciate it. I know we had a lot of back and forth over the last 2 weeks regarding this policy and had the chance to meet before this meeting to just finalize some details and get some questions answered. And I appreciate the district's collaboration on that because I know a lot of parents in our community are wondering what's going to happen come this fall.
Oh, and Mr. President, one more thing. Mrs. Cashin mentioned that we'd gotten questions from parents about, hey, sometimes when your child is rising to middle school or rising to high school, you think about buying them a new device. My personal advice is do not do that because they can't use it during the school day. So save your money, use it for something else.
Okay, and looking at the policy before us, there's always exceptions, and I noticed like with the IEP and the 504s, there'll be some flexibilities there that makes sense. But so there will be, I imagine writing this will be manifested in a handbook. I think is that where we'll likely see it next. So there'll probably be a lot of discussion and deliberation, I think, when we get to that point. But thank you very much for all the hard work that you've started to put into it. I think there'll be a lot more coming. Any more discussion on that policy? Okay, thank you. Our next topic is we finally get to the workshop topic. And on the operating on the referendum, and Dr. Osterreich, could you lead us?
Yes, thank you. So tonight, our school board of trustees will participate in a referendum workshop as part of our continued discussion regarding the financial impact of recent legislative changes and the potential need for a referendum. During the workshop, I'm going to present a draft of some information and messaging that may be shared with the Carmel Clay Schools community in the coming months. The purpose of this discussion tonight is to provide the board with an opportunity to review key points, ask questions, provide feedback, have further discussion. And we have some new information to present tonight as well, so I look forward to sharing that with you as we will begin our fourth public meeting on a consideration of a referendum. So at this time, if we could transition to the tables in front of the dais, and I will go ahead and get my computer set up as we begin tonight's presentation. All right. Well, strong schools are one of the defining strengths of Carmel. They help attract families, support local businesses, strengthen property values, and create opportunities for students that few districts in the country can match. This presentation is about preserving that excellence. Over the next few slides, we're going to show you not only what Carmel Clay Schools has accomplished, but also why maintaining this level of excellence matters for the future of our community. Before we discuss the funding and the finances and the challenges ahead, it's important that we start with what Carmel Clay Schools represents today, one of the premier school districts in Indiana and in the nation. So Carmel Clay Schools remains one of the top performing districts in Indiana and nationally. The district is recognized as a top public high school in the Indianapolis area and Hamilton County, a top 2% high school nationally, and an AP Honor Roll Gold Distinction District. The point here is not just rankings. The point is that Carmel has built a culture of high expectations over generations, and families move here because they expect the level of excellence to continue. Now, Carmel Clay Schools is ranked at the very top of Indiana in iLearn performance, #1 in combined English and math, #1 in English language arts, and #2 in math. The district has also seen major iRead growth among special education students and multilingual learners. It is important that Carmel is not only achieving at the top, it is improving outcomes for groups of students who need additional support. So I did want to share a little bit about dual credit because we got new information on this recently, and it's one of the clearest examples of real value for our families. So we offer over 49 dual credit classes with more than 2,300 students enrolled and nearly 4,000 total dual credit enrollments. So let me give you a statistic from 2025. We had 2,277 students who took 5,144 AP exams, and nearly 95% of the exams that were taken earned a 3 or higher. And so these courses allow students to earn college credit while still in high school, saving families millions of dollars. And we estimate, and I think this is a low number, we estimate that our families have saved over $5 million in tuition because of these great courses that we offer at Carmel High School. So what you're seeing now is just an example of the accomplishments, recognitions, championships, awards, academic achievements, performances, student successes that have all taken place along Carmel Clay Schools just this year. In fact, there are so many accomplishments that the list has quickly become impossible to follow. And that's actually the point. We don't expect everyone to read every line. We want you to appreciate the sheer volume of opportunities and successes taking place across our district every day. These accomplishments span academics, athletics, performing arts, STEM, robotics, debate, media, music, service learning, and student leadership. They represent students with different talents, different interests, and different goals. When people think about Carmel Clay Schools, they often think about a championship team, a top academic ranking, or an award-winning program. But what truly defines Carmel is not any single accomplishment. It is the culture of excellence that makes all of these accomplishments possible. So let's get into the data portion. So think of Carmel Clay Schools' budget like a delivery truck. It's bringing in funding our school needs, but that's made up of two primary funds. So one is labeled the Education Fund. This fund goes directly to student instruction and learning. So think about teachers, instructional assistants, textbooks, and everything happening inside our four walls. The second barrel is the Operations Fund, which holds non-academic expenses. That's transportation, utilities, building maintenance, all essential, but not the heart of the instructional day. So now, here's what's important. More than 78% of Carmel's total state support is dedicated to teacher compensation in the Education Fund. The state recommends 65%. Carmel Clay Schools, as I just said, is at 78%. The Operation Fund handles critical needs, but still secondary to the classroom. The takeaway is simple. We prioritize learning. So now let's take a little closer look at one of the biggest funding sources we have, the state basic grant. And so the blue paint, as you see, represents those dollars being poured into the budget. You'll notice that the vast majority of the blue money is going into the Education Fund barrel. That's not an accident. Carmel puts 85% of its state basic grant into the Education Fund. And as we just stated, over 78% goes to teacher compensation. And it means we're not just using those dollars exactly how, it means that we are using those dollars, let me preface that or clarify that, exactly how they were intended for student learning. So then you'll see a small amount, just 15%, flow into the Operations Fund. Again, this is about priorities. We direct as much as possible towards the classroom, and our numbers prove it. Now, let's talk about the other big funding source, local property taxes. The yellow paint represents those dollars, and you'll see it being poured directly into the Operations Fund barrel. Unlike the state basic grant, property taxes don't touch the Education Fund. They're specifically designed to support non-academic needs, such as buses, custodial staff, technology, building maintenance, all the things that keep our schools running on a daily basis, even if they're not a part of that classroom experience. It is an essential part of our budget, as we know. So, another fund that we have as part of the school budget that we need to understand is the Debt Service Fund. Think of this as a mortgage payment. When Carmel builds a new school, renovates a facility, or makes a major long-term improvement, we are required to borrow money to do so, just like families do when they buy a home. The way we pay that off over time. The Debt Service Fund is how we make those payments. It's completely separate from the Education Fund and the Operations Fund, and it's used only for one purpose, repaying bonds on past project. We cannot commingle those funds as we've talked about in the past. And we can't use it for teachers or classroom needs. Indiana law prohibits moving dollars in between those funds. The money in the debt service fund is legally locked in. It can't be used for salaries, programs, or anything else. So let's talk about the green paint now. So that represents the referendum fund, a vital source of revenue created in direct response to growing funding pressures and why we're here this evening. Back when the state support for public schools began to fall behind and property tax caps squeezed local budgets, districts like many of our neighbors and Carmel Clay schools had to act. This is why this fund was established, to protect classroom instruction from being shortchanged. Now, in addition to those continued pressures, the legislature has further reduced the amount of property tax revenue available to schools, creating an even tighter squeeze that we're going to get in, and you're going to see some examples and dollars on that shortly. And so the referendum isn't a blank check. It's targeted. It fills the gap that state funding doesn't happen in both of those barrels, and it allows us to maintain the quality our community expects. The referendum ensures we can offer more than just the minimum. It's how we can protect programs, keep class sizes reasonable, and retain staff even if other districts are cutting. So now, let's take a closer look at the revenue pressures that shape the funding that we receive. We're going to focus on that blue money next. And so each dot, I think you're going to like this. Graph up here. Each dot represents one of Indiana's 376 public, charter, or virtual schools. So down at the very bottom, you can see the lowest funded is a traditional public school, Zionsville, ranked last, receiving $7,026 per student from the state grant. So the state average is $7,734. Now, as we move up the chart, we see various districts, Westfield, Noblesville, Avon, and the top traditional public school is Gary at $9,266, ranked number six. There are 5 charter schools that are above Gary. And so when we reveal Carmel, we rank 375th in the state and the second lowest funded. The gap between our $7,047 per student and the state average is $687. Multiply that by our enrollment, and that's an additional $11 million we'd have just if the state considered us average. And so finally, to note that all the schools that we're showing up here from the bottom to the top all have operating referendums in place. So in fact, 1 in 5 Indiana public schools have a referendum. And so here's a look at our per student funding source since 2009 to 2026, which we started at $4,969. You can see that for the first 10 years, growth was minimal. Those were the lean years when many schools turned to referendums for support. Eventually, growth picked up, and bringing us to $7,047 by 2026. Now, here's our reality. Over those 17 years, funding increased about 41.8%, or just under 2.5% per year. But inflation, as you see up on the chart, was over 56%, or over 3.3% per year. So if the funding had kept pace with inflation, we would be at $7,772 per student in 2026. The difference, $725 per student, which means we would have an additional $11.5 million this year alone. So let's take a look at the impact of the tax rate and how property taxes are calculated. So if we take a home assessed at $500,000, the homestead deduction removes $48,000. We talked about this in one of our first meetings. Then the supplemental deduction in 2026 is 40%, which brings us to the taxable value of that $500,000 home at $271,200. We then divide that by 100, multiply it by the tax rate, and in this example, we're going to use 24 cents, which is the current combined rate of our referendums, and that's the annual tax impact. Dividing that by 12 gives the monthly cost typically paid through a mortgage. So let's just ground us here. So this is the baseline year under the current rules here in 2025, or 2026. We're using 2025 as a point of comparison for what comes next. And so that $678, that tax impact, is what most folks would see before SCA 1. But it doesn't stay that way. And so let's dig deeper into that. So this year, in 2026, the supplemental deduction increased to 40%. That's more savings for the homeowner and less for the schools. It lowers their referendum tax bill. So in this example that you see here, the annual impact drops from $678 to $651. That's a 4% cut. Sounds great for taxpayers, and it is. Don't doubt that. But it also means less money for schools, and it doesn't stop there. Let's dig a little deeper. So by 2027, the supplemental deduction is 46%, and you can see how it increases each year until 2031. By then, a home's taxable value will only be 1/3 of its assessed value. For example, the $500,000 home will be taxed at just $166,500, reducing the taxable value by over 41% from 2025. The amount that the voters approved will be reduced from $678 that I showed you to $400. So before making any decisions, what we did as a district is we wanted to make sure we were working from accurate, defensible financial data, not estimates or assumptions. So to do that, as you know, at 2 of our meetings, we had Policy Analytics, a firm that specializes in Indiana school finance and referendum analysis, come and present to us. So what they did is they conducted a parcel by parcel review of the entire district's tax base and to model the projected impact of SCA 1 on Carmel Clay schools over the next 8 years. You can go back to any of our previous, so this is our 4th meeting, go back to our first couple of meetings and you can see that online and watch that. Their analysis looked at assessed value trends, tax cap impacts, new taxpayer credits, projected revenue losses, and long-term cash flow projections. This is important because the financial challenges that we are discussing tonight, they're not theoretical. They are based on detailed modeling using actual district property data and state funding assumptions. So the projections that you're going to see over the next several slides that I'm going to walk you through comes directly from that analysis and help explain why the district is facing significant financial pressure despite continued responsible financial management. So as we look at this chart, this is something we've seen before, but not kind of in this exact way. So we're comparing where our referendum's net assessed value, the tax base, was projected before SCA 1 and where it's heading now. So the yellow line shows our pre-SCA 1 trajectory, about a 4% growth per year. The 2025 and 2026 numbers are the actual numbers. And then after that, we look at the yellow line continued upwards in our old projections. Now, post-SCA 1, the blue line shows that new trajectory downward. And so the space in between the lines represents that projected loss in the referendum revenue. And that's combined from what was already approved by our voters in 2023 and then looking at the renewal of the safety referendum. So the gap adds up to an average, as we've shared previously, of $15 million per year lost in referendum collections. This year alone, we're down $2.8 million, and by 2034, we're projected to lose $21 million annually. And that's just the referendum. So other funds are also impacted as well. And as we shared earlier, Total reduction in revenue from 27 to 2034, it's almost 120 million, as we've shared. And so on top of those deductions, one of the biggest financial impacts from SEA 1 is something that most taxpayers don't realize is affecting schools directly, and that's the unfunded taxpayer credits. So it shows up right on your tax bill, and these credits lower individual tax bills, which is great for taxpayers, but the state doesn't replace the lost revenue to schools. And so historically, schools already absorbed losses from the property tax caps, often called circuit breakers. And Policy Analytics talked about this as well. But beginning this year, additional state-created credits dramatically increase those losses. The largest example is the new supplemental homestead credit, where eligible homeowners can receive the lesser of the $300 or 10% of their tax liability attributed to their homestead property. So again, while the savings helps taxpayers, the reduction comes directly out of our school funding. For Carmel Clay schools, the impact is immediate and substantial. And so as shown here, unfunded credits jump from 1.9 million to well over 3.2 million on the chart beginning this year and then continuing annually. And so these are not reductions caused by district spending decisions. These are state-created tax relief measures where local schools are absorbing this financial loss. And so this means fewer dollars available for staffing, transportation, student programs, safety, and day-to-day operations unless additional revenue or reductions are identified. So this is brand new data that we have analyzed, and one question that we've heard is whether Carmel Clay Schools is operating efficiently before asking voters to continue their investment in our schools. And so to answer that, we looked at publicly reported financial data from the Department of Local Government Finance, or DLGF for short, and compared Carmel to neighboring and similar school districts, as you can see. The result is clear. Carmel has the lowest expenditures per resident among every major district in this analysis. Additionally, one reason that Carmel is able to maintain a lower tax burden is that we operate very efficiently. In fact, Carmel spends about $858 less per student than the average Indiana school district. We also spend substantially less than neighboring districts. Despite that, our students continue to achieve at the highest levels in academics, the arts, as you saw tonight, and athletics. This isn't a story about overspending. It's a story about doing more with less. And so we shared this sample question with you at our last referendum meeting. And here is a draft question that voters could see in November. So we're proposing to raise the minimum rate to 42.74 cents from the existing rate of the two referendums combined, still well within reason when compared to other districts across the state. Why? Because we're trying to offset the damage caused by legislative changes regarding property taxes and to provide additional revenue to further supplement the education fund. The new rate helps us maintain teacher salaries, class sizes, academic programs, and student support services. It's not about adding, it's about sustaining what we have. And so the ballot begins by asking voters to approve an 8-year referendum. An 8-year referendum that combines and continues funding previously approved by the community. This proposal would renew the school safety referendum first approved in 2019, which is set to expire, and combine it with the operating referendum approved in 2023 into a single question. So the combined approach is being proposed in response to recent changes in the state law that will significantly reduce local school funding starting next year unless that referendum is approved. And additionally, the goal is to maintain stable funding so Carmel Clay schools can continue providing the level of excellence and student services our community expects without major cuts caused by declining revenue. And so I also wanted to point out, appreciate the board's feedback and what they shared and what Mrs. Cashin shared with us, but including renewing and replacing existing referendums that I just spoke to. And so that's something that we had added previous to our last question. If approved, the referendum would allow our schools to maintain current funding levels. This funding supports student safety, health, and well-being across the district, including continuing the employment and retention of school resource officers in all of our student-occupied buildings, especially our elementary schools. It would also help us support and retain teachers and staff during a time when statewide funding is becoming more uncertain. Supporting strong educators and staff is essential to preserving the quality of education students receive here in Carmel each and every day. Additionally, the referendum would continue funding academic programs and student support services that meet the educational needs of students. Without this funding, the district would need to make significant reductions to staffing, programs, and student services. The referendum is intended to preserve those educational opportunities and support systems currently available to students and families. So it is important to note, and we're going to show this over the next few slides, that the rate shown on the ballot represents that maximum possible rate. So in the first year, the estimated rate will be lower, 31.94 cents per $100 of net assessed value. So for a median value home in Carmel, the referendum portion of the tax bill is estimated to increase by less than $143 per year in the first year, and we discussed that at our last meeting. However, after accounting for the new state deductions and credits, the overall property tax bill for the same home is projected to decrease by approximately $263 per year. This proposal that we're bringing to the board continues the community's long-standing commitment and investment in our schools while combining prior referendum funding into a single question for our voters to approve. So before we dive into the numbers here, let me guide you through what the actual impact will look like, step by step. So we're going to start by clarifying the median home value in Carmel and what that really means for your tax bill. So the median home value, gross assessed value, is actually $482,000 in Carmel. However, the ballot has to show that $500,000 because the legislature said we must round up. And so on these charts going forward, we're going to use the $250,000 home, which is around that 25th percentile, and then also the $750,000 home, which is around the 75th percentile. So we're going to focus our next slides and step by step on that $482,000 gross assessed value median. All right, so in 2027, the first year, the actual rate is 31.94 cents. So for a median home, that's a $762 impact, just about 8 cents above today's rate of those two referendum combined. So let me see here. So here you see the current rate that is now in place of 24 cents. And the current rate, we're going to present that next to the rate that we're going to look at putting in place or proposing for the board to vote on next year. The actual impact in 2027 is the difference between these two tables. Now stay with me even further. So the real increase for the referendum in 2027 is $189. That's what's added by the new rate, far less than the $1,062 that we have to put on that question on the ballot. And so, and as a reminder, this is the change to the referendum amount, not the total or final tax bill. So now, with deductions and credits, your total tax bill drops in 2027. In fact, for a median home, it goes down by about $250. So that's the actual 2027 effect to your total tax bill for the same value home. Also for the new referendum tax rate and after the property tax changes take effect next year. Most taxpayers will see a reduction, but all will see little to no impact over the life of the proposed referendum. And so this slide, you've seen this before, this slide shows how the referendum rates rises toward 2031. But the tax bill continues to decline because that net assessed value, which is the tax base, drops so significantly. And so by 2028, your taxes drop by about $650. By 2029, they drop by almost $1,000 when compared to your bill from this year in 2026. Even with the referendum, taxes still fall long-term thanks to those legislative changes. And so strong schools are one of the defining strengths of Carmel. They help attract families, support local businesses, strengthen property values, and create opportunities for students that few districts in the country can match. This presentation is about preserving that excellence. I look forward to digging in with the board. I look forward to our discussion as well as our questions. I'm going to remain up here in case we need to go back to some slides and reference those. But at this time, we're happy to take any questions and look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ostreit. Is this on? Great, thank you. That's a good presentation, and we appreciate the first handful of slides being done at elevator speed.
You bet.
Thank you for that. So I'm going to open up for questions and comments, and this is a workshop. I'd like to see it just be conversational and discussion, and so I open it up. Open up. Who would like to go first? Chris.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dr. Ostrike, first of all, thank you. That is a ton of information
is.
at rapid speed. That is incredibly in-depth and down a rabbit hole. So much appreciated. Really love the graphics because I'm a visual learner. My question, if you can go back to the draft referendum language slide,
Yes, you bet.
whichever one you get to first. Yeah,
I'll just do the big
right
one.
there. So at our May 13th meeting, that number that in this draft is currently a maximum annual amount that does not exceed $61,981,519 was at the May 13th meeting approximately 72.6 million. Can you speak to that change, please?
Absolutely. I'll let Mr. McMichael take that one first, and I'd be happy to add anything.
Yes, excuse me, in the previous question, we had increased the 62 million, keeping in mind that this is a maximum. And so I related to when we do a budget, we know we can never collect more than we advertise. So we typically advertise high, not because we think that we'll necessarily use that, but that's what we were doing. And so, which I'm finding is pretty typical with other school districts, to allow, because you're forecasting 8 years out, and the reality is the likelihood that everything turns out 8 years from now the way we're forecasting it now is kind of slim to none. So that's the answer to your question. And so I would want to emphasize, however, and the board knows this, but for benefit of the public, every year this board approves a budget, which means approving tax rates. So I've had questions, for example, we've had questions about, that seems like a lot of money, and how do you know you'll need that? And we don't know. What we do know is that this referendum from the beginning was started to supplement state funding, and we know that's been pretty unpredictable. And so, what I would emphasize is that every year the board has an opportunity to decide, do we need the maximum? And we had an example fairly in recent years with our safety referendum. It was approved at 5 cents, and it took 3 years. We're at 5 cents now, but it took 3 years. We ran 3 years with 3.5 cents because we didn't need all the money. In that example, it took a while to get all the police officers hired and school resource officers hired and so forth. So again, I'd emphasize that every year the board has the opportunity and the responsibility to establish those tax rates. And I at least have full confidence that our board is very conscious and responsible relative to taxpayers. At the same time, responsible to, and I know we certainly care about children and their educational programs. So that's a difficult thing to balance because a great programs, that we're here to educate children, but somebody has to pay for it. And so I know that you all are sensitive to that and would continue to be that way.
And I'll also add, Ms. Wheeler, thank you for that question. Based upon the board's feedback, that was an analysis that we internally took a look at as well as policy analytics. But we wanted to go back to what we've been consistently communicating through our public board meetings, that $62 million. And the reason it's at that 61, 981, 519, that's the actual calculation based upon all the data that we have shared previously.
Thank you for pointing that out, because that's what I was going to say on the record, that sometimes what the community doesn't see is all of that work behind the scenes. And it was the board working with the district to consistently say, we are prioritizing teachers. We want to make sure we're taking care of our teachers. We want to be excellent schools, but we also need to be really good stewards of the taxpayers' dollars. So showing some restraint in what we would be going to ask for that max levy amount, what allows us to at least continue our current platforms, take care of our teachers, but continue every year to see those opportunities to fund at a very reasonable level. And not that any of us want to in 4 years from now be coming back, but if something drastically changes at the State House like they like to do, we can always reevaluate the referendum and have all of these conversations again. So I do appreciate that change, and I really enjoyed the new slides this evening that you put in that showed how we are doing so much more with less than some of our neighboring districts. I'd also like you to give just a elevator speech to the community as well, some of the conversations we've been having about those expenses that have increased too. So this isn't just about getting more money to ensure that we can pay our teachers and give them raises and retain our staff and have excellence, but it's also those expenses that just the size of the district, utility costs, insurance costs, that those increase and we have to be able to afford those.
Absolutely. And I'll also add to that, Mrs. Cashin, if something positive happens for public schools in the legislature and there's changes, the board also has the opportunity to adjust the rate as well if it impacts the district in a positive way. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to just make a comment on, generally speaking, we've got a situation where operating referendums have had been in place for quite a number of years. So this is not a new problem. It's just a matter of now it's taken another turn, right? With SEA 1, and also there's a tendency to lower the state basic grant, providing funds for other things like vouchers and programs like that. So that has tailored off, but also we've seen some decline in enrollment, and that's, my calculations, has affected us about $5 million a year. And my question is this, and I'll see what kind of answer you might be able to provide, but if enrollment is declining at a great, continues at some kind of a rate like what we've seen over the last 5 or 6 years, is our plan, do you think our plan would be to offset that with operating referendum rate, or would we decide that at some point we have to shrink costs to downsize with what our student population would be?
I'll let Roger kick us off, and then I also have some thoughts for that too as well.
So as the board knows, but the public may not, excuse me, when we lose enrollment, we're losing that $7,000 per student, because most people have heard the money follows the child. And that's a very understandable, but also very simplistic approach. So as enrollment, when enrollment has declined, we've also adjusted staff the best we could accordingly. So it does make sense that fewer students, typically you need fewer teachers. The challenge is if you in 15 schools and 16,000 students, if you lose 100 students amongst those 16 schools or 15 schools, the problem is a teacher may have one or two less students, but you can't eliminate the teacher, or the rest of the teachers, the class size would go way up. So typically, in our experience has been about half of that $7,000 we offset by reducing expenses. The other half is much more difficult because the other half assumes the cost of all the other. I don't want to say non-teachers, because it's all the teachers that are not in that classroom: art, music, PE, media specialists, social workers, counselors, and there's others. But those, and as well as your administration, building administration. And so, again, if a elementary school loses 10 students times 11 schools, you still need a principal, and because there's just the offset on the other half takes time. Now, if a school is losing, or if a school district is losing 500, 600, 700 students, 1,000 students, like unfortunately, some of our urban environments, eventually you close a school, or at least you have the opportunity, and we know how difficult that is. So that doesn't always happen as timely from a financial standpoint as people like me would like to see happen in terms of cost. But then you kind of catch up, because then you need one less principal and one less of everybody in the building, not just the teachers. Again, the teachers will follow the students to the remaining schools. So about half of, when you lose enrollment, about half of it can be offset, and Carmel has done a very good job and a timely job of doing that. We don't keep the same staff if we lose 100 teachers. We might like to, because then we can say our class sizes go down, but you can see the problem because the money goes away. And so about half of it is offset. The other half is the challenge. And it works, by the way, just the opposite when you're growing. And Carmel benefited from that since we've had this money follow the child. Because when you're growing and you gain 100 kids or 300 kids across the district, you need the half for the additional teachers. But you don't, at that point, if you have not built a new building and expanded, you don't need more principals. You don't. So it works the other way if you're growing. So it's kind of financially great when you're growing. It's very challenging when you're declining. The good news for Carmel is, and you're absolutely correct, Mr. Brown, over the last several years, for the first time in ever, I believe, Carmel lost enrollment after COVID for 3 years in a row. Then we started to gain a little bit, not much, but 40, 50, 60 kids, something like that for 2 or 3 years. And last year, we lost again. And having said all that, the forecast is for Carmel and I'm talking about for the next 8, 10 years. Again, farther out it gets, the less likely it's going to come out just that way. But that forecast by a professional demographer says the enrollment is going to be very stable here. It shows some decline. By some, I mean 100, less than 150, I believe. And so still $7,000 a student, but that's too close to call. So we have not taken enrollment or declining enrollment or growing enrollment into account because we don't see that as a significant factor that we should. So time will tell, how accurate that is. But as Ms. Cashin said, at the end of the day, 2027 is pretty clear. We have a formula. The piece that's still missing will be the enrollment in the fall, but it's pretty clear. Every year after that gets a little less clear. And economy, we know if we have a recession, particularly at the state, all levels, but particularly at the state level, because that funding is coming from from sales tax and income tax. So, if you have a major recession, people are losing jobs, thus income tax, and then the sales tax may go down, typically does, which is, by the way, what happened in 2010, as luck would have it. That's exactly when the 100-year recession started, and the state changed funding from a mix of property tax and state tax to all state tax. Um, so the timing couldn't have been worse. And that's also when we had our first referendum, and that was more than coincidental.
And I'll just add to that, as Mr. McMichael already shared, and I've been a part of this for the last about 7 years with Dr. Dudley, and now Dr. Dudley and Dr. Herrera. We have a very comprehensive staffing process where I know Dr. Dudley and I have made adjustments of the number of teachers based upon whether our enrollment goes up or down.
Mr. President, may I ask the next question? Okay, just wanted to make sure your question was answered. Um, I agree with Mr. Brown. You know, I think it's time to have a real conversation and hopefully give the administration guidance on where we think we'll go. It's time to, we're very close to time to vote. And I've had folks, you know, publicly be concerned that I, you know, don't support teachers and don't support staff. There's nothing could be further from the truth. And I certainly hope that folks understand, or at least the majority of folks understand, since you can't make everybody happy all the time, is that my questions, and I think the questions of my brethren, are all about transparency and making sure we understand the issues and shouldn't be, you know, interpreted as, you know, wanting wild swings in any direction or how we might vote on anything. I don't think that's fair. On the other side of the coin, I've also gotten comments from folks along the lines of, well, you just don't want to cut anything ever. You know, you don't want to have to ever do a budget cut. And that's just not true either. The truth lies somewhere in the middle. Understanding that it's my personal intention to always prioritize people, meaning our teachers and staff, over things when it comes to what we fund. That will always be my rule of thumb. And also understanding that we, as a state, and I think as a community, may be more socially progressive, but fiscally, we are historically a very conservative community. And I do that lead in because essentially what we're looking at this point is 3 scenarios that we've been talking to the public about, what I'll call a low, a medium, and a high scenario. That is this going back to the maximum annual amount that does not exceed X. And those options, you know, to refresh people's recollection, were essentially a not to exceed number. In 2034, again, 8 years out, what's being recommended is the 62 million. And if I make an error, please interrupt me. The medium number was 59.3 and the low number was 55.4. Here's where I struggle as a board member. Do I, thinking about, hey, is it reasonable for our community to expect we are made whole, we are given enough funds that the community has historically with the referenda that they have approved, we get back to those numbers and we're able to meet the goals of our strategic plan and keep our staff whole and keep our programs whole? Is that what we want people to vote on? And so do we take these, what are scientific estimates, but still estimates? Do we take the highest of those 3? Or do I look at it and say, yeah, if things don't play out, am I as a board member willing to say, yeah, I think we can find $2.8 million of quote unquote things to cut instead of people? I don't know that it's reasonable to say, no, I don't think we can. But that also doesn't mean that we couldn't use the top number and still not have to cut. And I think that is I don't have a crystal ball, and I want to make the best choice. Um, but I'm struggling with how to defend the 62 million versus the 59.3 million, particularly when in this budget year of 2026, we were able to make up for um, a deficit of, what was it, 2.8 million. So I'm interested, particularly from Mr. McMichael, from Dr. O, from Mrs. Kushar, what are your, tell me, is there a red flag with that middle number? Does that make you nervous? If you had to cut things, what would you recommend? Give me your advice as a school board member and as the experts on that middle versus high number. I'm very interested in that.
Thank you for that. I would preface by saying there's an issue that I do not believe we made as clear as we could have and should have. Your comments are right on in terms of making up what we've lost with Senate Bill 1. The reason for the 62 rather than the 59 is um, the 59 would make up for what we lost, or close to it. However, you'll remember that last year the board approved and we settled a 1-year contract. We used the money from both years of the biennium, the funding for 2 years, to do that, and still had a slight deficit with a 2% raise. And I think that's, in today's world, that surely is not excessive. It finished with a deficit, and if you give no increases at all for salary and benefits, including insurance, which you really don't have control over, which are as we know, the medical trend is the trend is over 10%. We've been fortunate to keep it in single digits, but that's the problem. So the other piece of the equation that we have not made clear is that if we did not have Senate Bill 1, I would be recommending that this board increase that 19 cents to 22 or 23 cents, as we did earlier when we started at 16 and it got worse when we went to 19. And that's the part we did not make clear. And so it is a matter of cutting, because the administration at least will recommend consideration of some modest or minimal increase in salaries, subject to this referendum, of course. But the alternative is you either put it on the backs of employees because you do not have enough, we don't have money to give, as I said, to even cover the increased cost of insurance, and no increase in any other salaries and benefits, and that's where we spend almost all of our money. So that's the problem, and that's 27. I'm not talking, that's pretty clear. As I said, I'm not talking about 3 or 4 years out. I'll let somebody else forecast that. But in the very immediate sense, and we're gonna start a formal, as we're required to, we'll start formal bargaining in September, and there is no money. I want to make that very clear. There is no money, and the only way there's money, but there is money. We have, as has been pointed out several times, we spend 250 million, whatever. We send 150 million in education, the operations fund. There's a lot of money, and I've said this to many people. So we can give you guys can approve any raise you want. You just can't pay as many people. So that's a polite way of saying, if you reduce cost for people, and I'm not talking about just teachers, but that is the largest chunk, by several $1 million, then you would have the wherewithal to give the remaining staff a minimal increase. Your other alternative is you put it on the backs of the employees and don't give them any increase. And I don't believe this board is inclined to want to do. I know you don't want to do that, and I would hope you wouldn't do that. But that's the rest of the story. And that's the missing piece, and that has caused confusion. That's why I'm saying, in hindsight, we would have emphasized this in the first place more so than we did. Sometimes when you deal with this stuff all the time, you can kind of forget that not everybody is understanding it from the same perspective. So I hope that's helpful.
Super helpful. Thank you, Roger. Dr. O, did you have anything else to add? So I'm going to, Roger, try to summarize that in my non-accounting brain.
Can I add something?
Yes, please, please, please.
So you asked about kind of is there a red flag? And so I think for me what that is just looking at our cash balances, particularly in the education fund and the operating referendum. We are losing cash, and we have been over the past few years. And then this year alone, we're losing over $2 million in cash across those funds. And that's with a budget that does not include any raises or any increment. Or any increases in health insurance, like you said. And if we would have projected those increases, we would be even significantly lower than that. And so that really demonstrates, I think, the need for the bigger increase in funding to really increase what we were getting from the referendum to begin with, in addition to the loss from SB1.
That's super helpful. Thank you, Mrs. Kushar. So just going back to trying to summarize it for my brain, if we went with the middle number of 59.3 million maximum annual impact, we would, as soon as next year, in order to give our staff raises, we would have to cut staff to have the money to give the remaining staff minimal raises.
Not quite. And here's why. And again, you can see how confusing the state required question is. Because the maximum is the 59, the maximum tax rate's the 42 cents. It's not the 31 cents that was up there a minute ago. So you could say, well, we're gonna give a raise next year, or some kind of adjustment in salary, but the tax rate then would not be 31 cents. It might be 35 or 6, whatever it takes. And so with this question, this board wouldn't do this because you've explained the intent, but you could start at that 42 cents for all 8 years.
Okay.
And
yeah.
so you could see you'd have significant amount of additional money should you do that. I know you wouldn't, but you could. And so the human nature says, well, let's do that, and we'll worry about 8 years from now later. And typically, we kind of know how
You
that
just
can
gave me a
work
heart
out.
attack.
Eventually, later comes. This is like, we'll worry about retirement later, right? And well, I'm now of an age that I realize how that didn't work out so good. We can deal with next year, and we could even more than deal with it next year financially, because you've got that whole latitude to go from instead of 31 cents, you could go immediately to 42.74, and you'd have plenty of money in 27. But our estimate would be that, again, it's forecast, but you'd have an increased likelihood that you would have significant financial problems in those later years. And we may anyhow. This just raises the risk. And my point is that if, to the extent the board is reviewing this every year, you have some opportunity to make you make a decision every year. And so the lower that high number is, which is why many districts are adding to that, and as you noted earlier, we had it at 72 million, not because today I think we'll hit 72 million, but if you get to year 3 or 4 and another program at the state, like a voucher program, takes another $1 billion out of the pot, it'll change the financial circumstances. Remember, this referendum's there because of inadequate state funding since 2010. That really hasn't changed. It's gotten worse. And so that's the reason we would still recommend a higher amount. And we wouldn't do this, but if we could have had the higher amount be 72 million, and then it might feel better if you pick the middle one at 62. It just happens that we were sufficiently conservative enough that in some ways it kind of can be detrimental, because it's it's like, well, you're going for the highest rate possible, and then to the extent that there's a perception by some people that those school administrative bureaucrats, they spend the maximum money they can get no matter what, and which does round me up a little bit because I want to remind people I get paid the same either way, and I don't get to keep the money here. So, and my children aren't in the public schools anymore. So, um, what motivation would we have to do that? And the answer is none.
So that's back to the difference between the tax rate and the max levy amount, right?
Yes.
Okay, so thank you for that clarification. That's really helpful. And to your point, Mr. McMichael, I mean, we are a taxing authority. We do a lot, we talk a lot about setting the budget and approving the budget, but part of approving a budget and why we were elected is to set a tax rate. I'm not afraid to do that, but I'm going to do that fully within the education I get from our professional staff and the administration, and I have no doubt that neither one of you would recommend we go to the max anyway, right? So that's really helpful.
Yeah, one last comment. I'll be quiet. Or I'll try
No,
to-
because I have a
I'll-
question for you.
I'll try to be. It's exactly what you said. This is a maximum rate. It's simply, in my mind, it speaks to, it's not as though, oh, you're going to raise this much money, my taxes are going to go through the roof. We'll tell you that each year, or you will, as you approve budgets. And my assumption is that if your constituents feel you're being excessive, that'll come up at the next election, and as it should. That's a wonderful thing about our system. So you've been entrusted to look out for the community, the voters and the taxpayers, and that's exactly what you do, I think.
I'd like to pull a little bit more of that McMichael math out of your head for you to educate us, because I think we've talked a lot about those rates and the buildup and then what the max levy is. I think what we haven't heard yet is some of that background math as to the projections you made to say why we need things over the next few years. I know we talked about how the net assessed value is projected at an average 4% growth each year. However, were there calculations in it for the expenses that are going up? Were you assuming a 2% raise would be recommended for the teachers each year? Like trying to get a grasp on that number rising, what that covers to say we're not looking to put in 5 new pathways in the high school, or we can't build any buildings with it anyway, but the things that you would normally hear from the people that say you guys will spend every penny that you have. Because like some of the expenses that you guys collected for us when we were doing some of the background education, right? That health insurance you mentioned in 2016 was 19.2, and in 2025 it was 29.2. Those are the types of increases that we're seeing. So can you better educate the board and the community on what inputs went into why you think next year we need 31 and so on and so forth?
Yes, first, remember that 80% of the money is from the state formula, which you have no control over, and none of us here have any control over. And in my view, it's been inadequate. That's why we have a referendum. And so starting there, the 4% is for the other 20%, which is the referendum. And so again, we looked back and said, well, the average funding, you know how averages are, but the average funding from the state has been about 3.5%. Now in 27, it looks like it's 26, 27. It's a little less than 1.5%. That's the problem, and so this is supplement to that. So if this is 1.5%, 80% is 1.5%, and this goes up 4%, it helps, but it doesn't mean the whole pot is 4%. Or whatever that total is. Well, that would be the total, or up 4%. And so we certainly are aware and look to the past. And yes, we assume there would be, the 4% kind of represents in our mind an inflationary rate. And in recent years, it's been higher than that, but in prior years, it's been lower than that. That's why it may not be enough, or it may be too much. Thus, back to the every year you consider all that. And so that's where the 4% came from after 27. And so that you'll see that the 31 cents is more than that. So as I said, we first need to get up to where we would have been had there not been a SEA 1. And then, as I said, we need some additional to further supplement the state revenue for 27. And so we have not assumed that need going forward beyond the 4%. And so that's why it's anybody's guess whether that's enough. The likelihood it'll be too much is, I think, based on the history since 2010, is pretty slim. And I realize past isn't guarantee of the future, but that's how it all works. And so that's why we settled on the 4%, because again, this whole forecast is assuming all kinds of enrollment as Mr. Brown said, inflation, state funding. I mean, it's all of that's in there.
On the expense side, we projected minimal raises because that is our hope to be able to do that for our staff. And then we pulled historical data for all the other expenses to be able to project it out. We were hoping that inflation improves. I don't know that we're headed that direction, but we looked at kind of what has happened recently. We looked at different timing for those and then did projections based on that data. And that's what we used to project which of these scenarios was going to be best for the schools.
So just to summarize from my perspective, what I just heard was essentially that all of those expenses were accounted for, and that is why it is recommended for a stair step. It is not so that we can get more money, figure out how to use it and what to put it against. It is literally to take the staff we have, the curriculum we have, the programs we have, everything, and supply our education fund salaries to those teachers, our SROs, our mental health, and be able to maintain the excellent caliber that we have here. And to Chris's comment earlier about, we're getting close to that decision, so where are we at? And like I think I've communicated before, and Ms. Wheeler said today too, is like being around that 59 feels like a really good spot because we are trying to show some restraint in the budget situations that a lot of the public is having. I do understand, though, that we don't know what's going to happen in 8 years, so there is some flexibility that needs to happen with the anticipation that that state basic grant could continue to go down and put us in a less favorable position on a per student basis. I do think there are things we could look at in the district, as we are the only district in Hamilton County that does not have open enrollment. So there are things that we could explore in the future if we really had to as well, and having that larger conversation.
Jennifer, if I can just point out too, that stair step is also as a result of this, right? That net assessed value. So that always keep in mind that that net assessed value is dropping considerable amounts.
Yeah, I've got a few questions if I can interject. I appreciate the conversation. I think it helps all of us understand. I have one question on timing. We've talked a lot about 2027, and we're entering the budget process for that. We'll be approving the 2027 budget this fall. So if the vote for whatever gets put on the ballot is, let's just say it's approved, we can't really, can we use that new rate? Or are we still confined to the 19 cents for the operating and 5 for the safety?
No, the new rate would be 27, starting 27. So yes, you would use the new rate.
So this fall, I mean
well, it'd be
for the 2027 budget.
Well, here's where it gets. The 27 budget is a calendar year budget, as you know, but the state funding is on a fiscal year, which is 26, 27. But the supplemental income revenue from the referendum is on a calendar year because people pay taxes in May and November. So it's a combination. But this money that we're talking about, that would become available in January, essentially. I mean, during 27, and which is always what happens. We receive it twice a year, but we're anticipating it for the entire year.
So we could do an additional appropriation in 27 if the referendum passes.
Yes, yes, additional appropriation is just another way of saying authority to spend cash, but of course you have to have the cash to be able to spend it. And so, and we haven't started bargaining, and so we absolutely can't be presumptuous as to what the outcome of that could be, because then you would not be bargaining in good faith if you already decided you knew what was going to happen. So we're careful to make that clear. But with all of our other employees, we are not anticipating recommending salary increases at this time because we don't know if we have. Right now, I would tell you, unless it changes, you don't have the money to do that unless you make cuts. And so I would not recommend that you reduce, several $1 million to do that. I would recommend that later if it became necessary, quite honestly, because again, the alternative is you just, sorry, but we can't give anybody salary increases of any kind. And in fact, under the law, you can reduce their salary. Now, start to imagine remember that all of our neighbors have referendums as well, and there is a competition out there these days for employees, not just teachers. And so it's a much bigger discussion, but you see the problem. But as certainly CFO, and I know you wouldn't want to do this, you can't be presumptuous that this is going to pass. We're hopeful, but if it is put on the ballot, but in this case, we need to know.
So, yeah, let me clarify that again. You may have answered it and I didn't catch it. So in September and October, we're going through the budget and we're going to be approving a rate for the referendums, but those are already capped at 19.4 cents, right?
For 26. 27 is a new program.
So when we approve the budget this fall,
Yep.
this before the vote.
Yes.
So the max we could go, aren't we limited to the 24 cents?
Yes.
Okay.
Which is why, based on the current circumstances, we will not be presenting a budget that results in several $1 million of deficit. For example, if we said, well, as we typically have when we have a formula and we know the money and so forth, and we would, as you know, you would approve a 2-year contract, and but in 27 it's going to be different because, as we said in 26, that the money that will be available for 27 right now will not be sufficient to assume any adjustments in salary or anything else for that matter, and it will likely also show, even at that, you're still running a deficit, not as large as some, but still, it'd be more likely it'll show a deficit. It won't show. We won't be making a recommendation that chooses to make it worse. Put it that way.
But then in theory, we going to be planning a budget that's $6 million short and having?
Depends on your definition of short. If you don't anticipate any of expenses you can control, which is salary, if you basically don't say we're not going to allow that to go up, which is why we're saying we're going to recommend a pause on any salary adjustments because you don't have the money. And if a referendum is approved, then you at least can consider salary adjustments at that time.
Here's where I get confused. Looking at the timing on this chart, we've got it right up here.
Yep.
2027, it says 30.3194. But when we're creating the budget, we're approving a budget for that year, we're throttled at 24 cents.
I would say yes, because remember, you approve the budget, but ultimately the state has to approve it, and they won't approve it for revenue that's not coming in.
Right. That they don't know it's coming. So we will be budgeting at the 24-cent rate.
I expect that we're going to get some guidance from the DLGF because there are going to be, about 100 schools that are in this same situation because there's so many referendums running this fall where budget season is happening as these referendums are running. And so I expect that they will give us some guidance on how we're supposed to handle it this year. They have not yet, but I expect they will.
At the same time, this is a unique year. There's no question about that. So it's hard telling, what the outcome will be. But up until now, at least, when the state approves a budget, um, they will approve it to the extent that you demonstrate that you have cash to support it. Now, um, in spite of everything that you're thinking, we do have cash balance. So we could create a budget that's that as long as, in other words, they include cash balance. So if you said we're going to create a budget and $6 million of it is going to be funded with one-time money of accumulated savings or reserves, they'll approve it.
So you're indicating the rainy day fund, essentially, utilizing.
Well, all the funds have cash,
Yes.
not just rainy day, but I mean the education, all three of the funds that we talk about, education, operating referendum, and rainy day, all that has cash. I wouldn't be advising you to approve a salary increase supported by rainy day funds, because we know that the salaries are recurring and the accumulation of cash balance is not. That works the first year. You got a crisis the second year, and particularly because we maintain we've been very conservative in maintaining cash reserves. And in fact, things have changed to where we're now, have increased them a bit or trying to. So that's kind of the whole picture. I don't want to make too much of 27 because at the end of the day, you approve a budget in 27, and if things change, usually you're increasing it for additional appropriation because maybe you receive more students or you have more money, so things go up. It would be no different. You could sometime during 27, now you know whether you have a referendum or new referendum or not. Remember, the old one, safety referendum goes away. That's a huge problem. But as far as the operating referendum, it stays the same, but it'll decline based on everything we've talked about. So